Okay, the next episode of Magic Live is finally here. Before we get started, if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We have some very, I guess you could say, ambitious goals, but we want to be able to run polls on what decks we're going to be playing. Magic Live is just a series where I record myself playing in tournaments, similar to watching a Magic Online League, but you're actually watching live play. This week it's going to be a highly requested deck, and I think a lot of people are also very picky with card choices, so you'll have to forgive me for the ones that I made. But this will be Blue-White Miracles, or a Blue-White control deck that tries to exploit miracle mechanics. And I will be doing a deck tech because this is new to the channel, so you'll see that through Magic Online, but after you see the list, feel free to skip ahead if you've already kind of familiarized yourself with the deck. So let's go ahead and get that part out of the way so we can get to the rounds. Okay, so this is if not the exact, a very close approximate to the list that I played. And this time, I did not play at my local game store. I actually managed to drive all the way to Chicago. Yes, I drove from Arkansas to Chicago. Not, I guess it's not technically to just play there, but that was a big part of the plan. And I was researching on what store to play at, and it was pretty universal that a store named Dice Dojo was the one to go to. So I went to go to Dice Dojo, and it just happened to also be, and I think this was on a Sunday, it just happened to also be their reopening of weekly events. That wasn't planned by me. The week I happened to be there, they also were bringing back weekly events due to COVID. So I guess it was just kind of meant to be. But this was the list I decided on, and there's a lot of card choices that are probably suspect by someone who's a hardcore blue-white fan, and I don't blame you. I'll explain why I chose what I chose, but I'm not claiming that it was correct. I mean, even after playing in the event, there's some things that felt a little suspicious, but I'm also just playing with a lot of cards that I personally like. And I've been playing a build of Miracles, very, very similar to this, not counting some of the new cards, for a long time. It's actually been serving me relatively well. Now, lately it's been not as good as it usually was. Some of that may be card choices, the metagame, personal mistakes. It was a combination of those things, but I'll go over why I chose what I chose here. So the main thing I wanted to do is I wanted to feature new Modern Horizons 2 cards, and that mostly takes form in Brainstone and Counterspell. So these are the two main new cards in the deck. Other than that, this deck has been, for the most part, unchanged since pre-Mystic Sanctuary. So this shell is what I've been working with. And Brainstone I'm getting the most pushback on from people because it's the main reason is it's not very good. It's clunky and slow, and it doesn't synergize with Snapcaster Mage, and it's just not that good. But I wanted to try it out, and honestly, the game's not going as well as I was hoping they were. Didn't feel like they were as much due to Brainstone, but could it have been a better card? Maybe. I was on frantic inventory for a while because I think that card's really strong. And being an instant card draw is good for triggering miracles. But Brainstone didn't disappoint me as much as I thought it would have. Turns out brainstorming with fetch lands is still very strong. It does still feel like draw 3 a lot of the time, and making Terminus in your hand not as dead without finding Jace the Mind Sculptor turns out it's not so bad. So I was pleasantly surprised. Counterspell is as good as you thought it might have been, but a lot of the rest of the deck seems kind of straightforward, but there's a notable card missing. Archmage's Charm. And you probably should be playing with the card. It's very strong, very powerful. But with the way that I've structured my particular Miracles list to play out in the games, I'm usually not wanting Archmage's Charm, but I probably will end up trying it. I just couldn't quite find what I wanted to cut because I had very specific engines I was going for. And I'll go ahead and explain what those are. Other than the obvious miracle things, I'm playing one Blessed Alliance for a couple of reasons. One is I like the card. I've always liked this card. I think it's very strong. But I guess the real reason in terms of strategic reasons is that it gives me a little bit of hedge. Not much, but a little bit of hedge against Burn game 1. So it's not a very good matchup game 1. So it helps a little bit, and it does some other things. I've killed Death Shadows with it, so that's pretty cool. But I'll go over my particular engines that I really enjoy, and that'll kind of explain a few things. So the biggest thing that stands out, other than missing Archmage's Charm, is there are 5 colorless lands. Now, I'm not playing Esper, so you can get away with it a little bit better. And 4 Field of Ruin's really just a hedge for Tron, and Tron got much better in terms of the matchup when Counterspell was printed. And it was already a decent matchup, maybe right at 50%, I don't know. But Counterspell helped a lot. But the 5th colorless land, I don't know if you can read that there, might be a little cut off, is Geier Reach Sanitarium. So it says each player draws and discards a card. Seems innocent. And on the surface, it helps you trigger a miracle on their turn, so that's pretty good. But when you have Narset Parter Veils in play, your opponents can't draw more than 1 card each turn. So on their draw step, you can activate it, and they just discard a card. You draw and discard, and they've already drawn for their turn on their draw step, and they just discard a card. Now that's strong. It's kind of cute. And it's relatively inconsequential for just being 1 land in your deck that has a little bit of synergy. And that's like a soft lock if you kind of run them out of cards. But with Teferi Time Raveler in play, it's a hard lock. Like if you've dealt with everything in play, and you get them down to 1 card, and you assemble the team, and you're just like, draw step, discard, discard. I mean, the game's basically over. And that's happened a few times for me. Well, maybe not in the Modern Horizons era, but just in general. I do play the one Entreat the Angels because I do like a way to just win the game. Even though I do personally enjoy playing control decks that don't have dedicated game-winning, like win conditions. I like cards that are flexible win conditions. And even Entreat, even though, it's basically in there to just have a 1-turn kind of game-ending spell, which is good for a control deck to have, I think. It's not completely ones. It can block things. There have been situations where Entreat the Angels was the only way to survive a turn, let alone win the game. And Celestial Colonnade coming back after the banning of Mystic Sanctuary is like kind of important because pressuring Planeswalkers can be a problem this deck has if it resolves. So the main game plan is to just counter their Planeswalkers, but if it resolves, there's only 2 Snapcaster Mage in the deck because that's a little bit of a non-boat with Narset, and I like that Narset engine, so Celestial Colonnade really fits the bill there. Now my sideboard choices are interesting. The core has been the same for the most part. I recently took out, what was that? Counters a blue spell, costs 3 less. I took that out for Flusterstorm just to try it out, and I've kind of liked it because when Flusterstorm counters something, you can't really fight over that very well. It's similar to Dovin's Veto, so that's what that package is. Mystical Dispute, that's the card's name. So I took Mystical Dispute out for Flusterstorm. I don't have Rest in Peace anymore, although I really considered Rest in Peace because I'm not playing Frantic Inventory. So really my only graveyard, without Frantic Inventory or Mystic Sanctuary, my only graveyard interaction is 2 Snapcaster Mages. So I think it's the single most powerful anti-graveyard card. So I was like, why not play it? Well, I wanted to try out another new card, Sanctifier en-vec, because other than being a sort of Rest in Peace in the decks where you would usually want that ability, it's also an Auriok champion. Like, it's just really strong. So I wanted to try it out. And everything else is pretty much the same for the blue-white deck I've been playing for the last 3 years, since 2018. Containment Priest is relatively self-explanatory, although it comes in a lot of matchups where you would want your Rest in Peace, but it's also really good against cards like Collected Company and other things like that. I do have the one Lyra Dawnbringer, and that's, control decks a lot of the time would have get your one big creature in the sideboard, and usually it's like that, or it could be a Baneslayer Angel. But Lyra Dawnbringer saying it gives all your other angels +1/+1 a lifelink. We can make some angels. So that's pretty cool. There's a little bit of synergy there. I'd like to think the rest of the deck's self-explanatory. Oh, there's one other thing that's kind of an anomaly that only I play. Like, no one else would ever play this card. Elspeth Sun's Nemesis. And when you look at it, it seems like not very powerful in terms of just raw Planeswalker power. It has no plus abilities. But interestingly, with the escape, that can kind of be a good thing. There's a lot of context. In fact, there's always there's one, I'll explain. Well, only one context, but there's a lot of context where you can basically activate her twice a turn. You activate her, she dies, she comes back, and you activate her again. So the only time you can't really do that is if you drop her at 5, minus her to 4, and then you don't have a way to -4. But it wouldn't really make sense to do that. Like, why would you -4, especially in this deck? The only real reason if you already have creatures in play. So I guess if you have a Snapcaster and a Colonnade, and you could caster and animate Colonnade and attack for 6/10, that'd be okay, but that means you're probably winning the game, so it's okay. But usually you're making some dudes, and you can gain life, make more dudes, or gain life +2/+1. So that's pretty cool. This card is very grindy, so you're bringing it in against your like fair grindy matchups, and that's where it's just an all-star. It feels not as powerful, but it feels a lot like Eurofell, where it just doesn't go away and it generates value over and over, and tempo advantage. It's not just card advantage. The 5 life matters a lot. So that's something that this card has never disappointed me in the matchups where I choose to bring it in. But that's the list. I'm sure blue-white fans out there, there's a lot that you don't like about my list. Like, there's a lot of cards I'm not playing. A lot of people are on Esper right now because black has a lot of really good cards, and I totally don't blame them. I just personally like Miracles. That's just something I've always liked. And I like the card choices. Like, I like the Narset Teferi engine with Geier Reach. This is something I like to do, you know. And I wasn't playing this at a GP or PTQ. You know, it was just a local, like, 4-round event. So I'm going to go ahead and get to the games, get to the commentary. And again, if you're just now tuning in, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because this will allow us to have the audience select what decks I play. Okay, here for round 1. Again, if you're just tuning in, if you're just now seeing this, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It'll really help a lot. It's completely free. Now, I am going to be on your left, and my opponent's on the right, and it's round 1 of a little just weekly 4-round tournament at Dice Dojo and the Chicago area. And what I'm doing at the bottom of the screen, obviously you see the life totals. The middle number, since I can only seem to find a 3-player game that faces that direction, the middle number will just be the game we're on in the match. So I'll go ahead. I'm usually not great at this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to try to skip ahead and get past all the filler of who goes first and mulligans and whatnot. Okay, it looks like there are some mulligans happening. Yeah, so we're going to get past all that. Alright, so it looks like did I go in the die roll? I'm not so sure anymore. Okay, so my opponent just fetches for a shockland on turn 1. And something I've noticed about control in the current, I don't know if you want to say metagame, just in general environment of Modern. You know, this is true anytime a format is revitalized or refreshed or new feeling from rotation, if it's standard or bannings or new cards coming out, especially such high impact cards and high impact sets like Modern Horizons 2. Control's not usually the best thing to do. Now, it's not necessarily true in this case because Esper is doing well and some other variants of that, but just a controlling strategy isn't necessarily bad. It's being reactive, specifically reactive as your main game plan. Because when you're a control deck, a reactive control deck, your advantage is that you have a selection of cards and a specific target or small group of targets that you're trying to beat. And you use that selection of cards to stop them from their proactive strategy from beating you. Like, that's what it is. But that is too wide open in a new format, whether it's, you know, whatever the cause is. And I would say that Modern Horizons 2 had such a high impact of power and diversity of power across many different cards. Dragon's Rage Channeler, Urza's Saga, Murktide Region. You know, some of them may see play together, but even Cookbook, it's just so many. I'm not even touching on nearly all of it. So many new cards, so many new powerful things to be doing, that being purely reactive as your strategy is probably not the best thing to be doing at the moment. And you know, for over, I would say the majority of, maybe not a large majority, but a majority of Modern's history, control hasn't been like that good. There have been pockets of times where like Jeskai was decent, but even Jeskai control could turn the tide and be offensive with burn spells and stuff. Blue-White Miracles, for the most part, is like the most reaction-based control deck you can have, especially in Modern. I mean, there were times in Standard where there was a blue-white deck in Standard with Elspeth. I don't say there's... Oh, and then there was an Esper deck a couple years before that, and it won with Nephalia Drownyard. Those are examples of completely reactionary-based control decks. Like, they didn't really have cards in there dedicated to win the game. Yeah, Elspeth could win the game, but that wasn't really why it was in there. It was another board wipe. It created a lot of blockers. But anyway, so far we've had mostly land go. It looks like we have, I think that's a Stoneforge Mystic ran into a Counterspell, and now we've got a Resolved Teferi Time Raveler. And if this Stoneforge deck is blue based, which it looks like it is, and if it's like a slightly controlling deck with Stoneforge Mystic, a Resolved Teferi is very powerful. It's going to be pretty difficult for these decks to get rid of. However, there's a new card called Prismatic Ending, which is very, very flexible, and that's really what makes the card powerful. I would say in general, and now we see it here, in general, you're trading parity at sorcery speed with the same amount of mana. You paid 4 mana, I paid 4 mana, get rid of your thing at sorcery speed, and then they get to untap with their mana. So if anything, the player that gets Prismatic Endinged is a little ahead in the exchange, all things being equal. But the reason the card is good and is seeing so much play is the degree of its flexibility is so high that overrides its tempo loss. As you can see right there, like it's just a one, answer anything, just a one card answer anything, and these are the reasons cards like Charms and Commands are good. Is their flexibility. It's the fact that this one card can do many different things, and Prismatic Omen, in a sense, is like the ultimate in charm flexibility when it comes to removing a permanent. So we go 3-drop Teferi into 4-drop Jace Punch, 1/2 punch, and it resolves them. And there's no, the only card he could have there was Force of Negation because he lost that tempo on Prismatic Ending. But it is worth it. Prismatic Ending's strength, while it's not super obvious on the surface, is made up for in its ability to just answer anything. But left unchecked, this Jace will run away with the game. It will just generate so many cards that it will assemble a combination of cards in hand and planeswalkers on the battlefield and mana advantage that will just win the game. Looks like we're going to try Stoneforge number 2. This will resolve because Force of Negation is not Force of Will. Force of Negation, while it is a very well-designed card, is not quite at the power level tier as Force of Will. Because Force of Will, you can protect your proactive thing, like casting Jace the Mind Sculptor, and it can counter anything, counter creatures. So if this was a game of Legacy, that would be a very good target for Force of Will because Stoneforge is a good threat. Even though right now it looks like the Miracles player is ahead, which I would say the Miracles player clearly is ahead, I think a Stoneforge-based control deck is a little better because you have a kind of a proactive plan you can do. Like, here's my 2-drop threat that you need to answer. But in the mirror match, maybe the control player has the Miracles player has a slight advantage, but it's not super obvious. So, and then I think that's Birds of Paradise. So Birds of Paradise, while being a very good card and very good with Prismatic Ending, is not like amazing in a deck like this, but it's not bad. I mean, you can accelerate you to your planeswalkers. It can carry a sword. It does some things. But right now, it's mostly like we're at nothing super exciting happening at the moment. It's just like, here's my card, a counterspell, removal spell. Jace right now is mostly going to help with the card selection a little bit more than the advantage, because I just want to make sure I can answer the threat he's presenting. He's like, okay, here's my card. If this card sticks around, I'll win the game. So Jace has to either deal with the Stoneforge in play or deal with the equipment. And a new equipment that the Stoneforge deck got is Cauldra Complete, if I'm pronouncing that right. And it's interesting because it's a living weapon, so it's very similar to the role that, of course, Batterskull would play, but I think Batterskull and Cauldra Complete play very, very different roles in the deck and take up very different slots in the deck. I think most blue-based Stoneforge Mystic decks, I think the slot that Batterskull fills is a little more important. The tempo is vastly, like the Vigilance and Lifelink, I think, are more important than the Indestructibility. But more important than that, the haste. More important than that, the rebuyability of Batterskull, like bring back to my hand, play it again, is the more important thing, because it is a little bit of a control deck, so you need to go a little bit later in the game. And while Cauldra Complete is a difficult threat to deal with, it is resilient, it's not impossible. There's plenty of things in the format that deal with it, especially with Prismatic Ending everywhere. So if they deal with your Germ, I mean, you just have this equipment that equips for 7. It's not very good. Whereas Batterskull, you can just rebuy it, put it into play again with your Stoneforge, and it's even cheaper if you're just casting it. So Batterskull coming into play, blocks, gains life, attacks, it can block again, and that's just a little bit better overall. But that doesn't mean there's not a place for Cauldra Complete, because sometimes you need to turn the tide fast, drop that thing and attack, especially if you're the beatdown, which clearly in this matchup, Stoneforge is the beatdown. So Culture Complete is interesting. I was kind of talking a little too much there, so I didn't see which equipment he got. And honestly, pretty much literally any equipment in this situation is fine. Like, they're all very threatening, even if it's just Sword of Fire and Ice. But I didn't see which one we got, and we're about to find out. I revealed a Terminus off the Narset, and I've got Brainstone. So I've got a lot of stuff happening here. If it's Cauldron Complete or a Sword, he can threaten to kill one of the two Planeswalkers. And Jace is probably the bigger threat, but Narset is very legit. So he just passed the turn. He's holding. That pretty clearly indicates he did not get Cauldron Complete. Finding a counterspell is perfectly reasonable off of Narset. So right now we're mostly just going to, build up counterspells, build up removal spells, find the right combination of cards. Force Negation is very good insurance, so now I can maybe play Planeswalker or something. Putting back an extra Narset, so brainstorming with Jace obviously very strong. Now the deck only plays 6 fetch lands. It plays 4 Flooded Strand, 1 Polluted Delta, 1 Misty Rainforest. But 4 copies of Field of Ruin is like a quasi fetch land. I mean, I'm gonna destroy a land, but I'm still shuffling my deck. I'm not going down a land. So there's plenty of ways to shuffle the deck, and now that there's 6 effective brainstorm effect cards in the deck, and Jace is a repeatable brainstorm. So an instep, we're going to see instep activation and an instep. I'm trying to remember the name of this card because it's obviously too small to see. Icefang Quaddle, which is very good. I mean, a 1/1 flying creature that draws a card at flash in your equipment deck is pretty good. It's also a blue card, which now that Force of Negation is a thing, we have a force effect in Modern. Having blue cards in your Stoneforge deck are good. But we didn't see an instep. We didn't see an instep equipment, so it's a little suspicious. I'm tempted to rewind and see what I missed there because I was talking too much. But we just got a poke coming, and it's coming at me. Interesting. Maybe he's not too worried right now about this Narset in play, so he just passes the turn. I mean, he's got to respect this Terminus. Maybe he might be leaving up mana for Counterspell, but I guess not. So it's interesting. Didn't see an instep equipment, so not clear what's happening there. So okay, so that communicates to me it probably is a living weapon, and he didn't want to run it into the Terminus, because Terminus was revealed when Stoneforge Mystic was summoning sick, I believe. But that's like a lose-lose for him. So I mean, you're either not putting pressure on, or you're saving it post-Terminus, and it's not in a good spot. So I'm just looking at both mana, tempo, the battlefield, cards in hand. It looks like all fronts are favoring the control deck, or the control role, I should say, because I think they're both kind of control decks. But being at 16 life too, I mean, it's one thing if you have all that. You have card advantage, you've got tempo in terms of your mana, you've got advantage on the battlefield. But if you're at 1 or 2 life and you're just struggling to stay alive, there's still room where that's the important factor. But the life total is just so high here that I'm comfortable saying that I'm currently winning on all fronts at this moment in the game. An instep Icefang is not a threat, but I probably asked there how many cards you got left in your hand. If he's at only 2 or 3 cards left, I think I'm okay trading a counterspell there, especially with how many. Look how many cards are in my hand. Trading 1 for 1 is very good, and Icefang represents a 2 for 1, so I think that's a good trade. Although I don't think I would normally counter that. I would just kind of let them play out their stuff and Terminus and get all that card advantage. I've already post Terminus, so I think that's good. Okay, this looks like, what is that card? He's got some fancy bordered cards here, so it's not super obvious what this card is. Looks like a creature. I apologize. I legit don't know what this card is. This was a couple weeks ago when I filmed this, but is this a Batterskull maybe? No, is this another Stoneforge? And okay, that's a Batterskull. I think this is a Stoneforge. Do they have different border Stoneforge, or do they all look like that? Am I just blind? No. Okay, it's not Stoneforge. Okay, maybe it is a Stoneforge and he's casting a Batterskull. Is that what's happening? Or maybe Cauldron Complete. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think he only has 6 mana. Okay, that might be a noble hierarch or something. So maybe it's a noble hierarch into battle, and he casts the battle scroll. Okay, that would make more sense. So Force Negation coming in clutch. It's a little awkward when you use a force ability like Force Negation, Force of Will, when you have just a little bit of mana up, because it's like this could have just been a counterspell, and I just 2-for-1 myself. But the effect is so necessary just to have that option. Force Negation more so because like I think I had 2 mana up there, which is just enough to not cast it. I didn't have a counterspell, so like just have to cast Force Negation. Now I believe that Battle Skull is exiled. He just has it in a weird spot on the screen. Okay, we are assembling Super Friends. It's happening. The lock is real. I think I missed a land drop. Oh, maybe not. If I play land, nope. I guess I did. So that means I have all spells in my hand, which is good because it's a bunch of answers. But also, yeah, control decks need to hit their land drops because they're using their mana a lot. But with Teferi, I'm gonna start untapping 2 lands every turn, and I'm not sure, and conceivably, how I could lose this game. I've stopped with the early brawl. Haven't been met really with opposing counterspells. He could have some more prismatic endings, but Teferi's a 5-drop. Okay, so that is, I'm pretty sure that's a Noble Hierarch. And he just attacks Narset for 1. Narset's not really that important at this point in the game. He could have some Archmage's Charms in step, I suppose. But this Brainstone just kind of sitting there, not really doing much. But the idea that it's there if I need it, I guess. It's not going to really serve the role of putting, because Jace can just put the miracles back on top. But it is still an instant speed draw to trigger miracles on their turn. And that's kind of why I was okay taking out Frantic Inventory. Because Opt obviously is the best for that, because it's 1 mana. But Frantic Inventory, even if it's just drawing 1 card, it's like an instant and you can do it on their turn. But once you're drawing 2 cards with it, that's an instant speed divination for 2 mana. Like, that's good. And when it draws 3 and 4 cards, like, obviously, it speaks for itself. But Brainstone's ability to put cards in your hand back on top of the library is important enough, and there's enough card advantage where I think that's fine. Okay, so we've got, I believe this is an in-step Endurance. No, he had to untap. So he's casting Endurance. Endurance main board is interesting. So it is shuffle, or not shuffle, I'm sorry. It's shuffle at like the randomness, and then you put it on the bottom of your library. It's not actually exile, and it looks like he's targeting himself, which is, I've seen some people do this. I guess it's okay. I don't really have a strong opinion on it yet. I've had in another tournament, a guy, at least 2 times in one game, he enduranced himself. And it was a control mirror, I suppose. So it's like, I guess, is that your logic there? Just recycling your threats? Is that better than taking out spells for Snapcaster Mage? I don't know. I mean, maybe it is, because let's say you take out their graveyard, you're just going to play more spells later that Snapcaster can be fueled by. So it's not really clear. So I don't know what the right answer is there. Okay, I believe that is another one. So that if those are Noble Hierarchs, then this is an attack for 5, and he's pointing at his cards like Exalted triggers. So I'm pretty sure that's the case. So he attacks Teferi for 5. I think I'm okay. I'm not really trying to win the game with a Teferi ultimate, and my live total hasn't changed in so long. My screen went dark. Sometimes I catch that, but okay. In-step Opt. This is probably no. Never mind. I was like, maybe this is a Entreat the Angels to finish the game, but I'm looking at it for a sec. So I guess that's not the case, or I just don't trust that I'm in a position where I can do that. But I don't think he has many cards in his hand. Okay, no, there's the Entreat. So I did set up Entreat with Jace, and by doing this instead of Brainstone, I keep the Brainstone for later, and it's 1 less mana, so it's 1 more. And he's just like, I got nothing, bro. You win. So Miracles takes the first game. I think rather convincingly. Like, there was no threat that felt like, oh no, I'm barely able to deal with this. So that makes me feel good about the deck. Yeah, I'm feeling good. So we're going through sideboards. I have a plan. This is where I think Elspeth would be really good. But Stoneforge always is never bad. I don't think Stoneforge has any straight up bad matchups. And now he's on the play, so we head a little bit. So cast an Abundant Harvest, clearly naming land. And we do get to see a little bit of information here. We've got a Veil of Summer with sideboarded in. I doubt it was a sideboard card. Maybe it was, but we see a card we didn't see game one, Spell Queller, which is a very strong card, especially on the play. And there's very few meaningful turn one plays in a Miracles deck. I mean, you can have Opt on their instep, you could have a Brainstone, and that's really about it. Because you're probably not going to cast a Path to Exile turn one and give them a land. I expect to see a Stoneforge Mystic here. It looks like our opponent found a Counterspell, which is good. I'd like to believe they probably had Counterspell in their deck game one and just didn't find it or didn't have it at the right time. But a Stoneforge on turn two is about as good as they can get. Now the interesting thing here is Cauldron Complete is faster clock, but it's a little awkward. Well, I shouldn't say that. I would say it's a little awkward to get on turn two, but maybe not because you can just untap and do it on your main phase because it has haste. I believe that's what that is. Cauldron Complete. I'm not 100% because I'm not sure what some of these new. There's so many different borders and artworks of cards. It could be a sword I'm not familiar with, but I think it's Cauldron. So, got to think. Okay, if I'm the Miracles player, what's my game plan? Like, obviously, I want to repeat the process of game one, but we're assuming our opponents have new cards that will help their cards match up better against the answers that I have. It seems reasonable to bring in a Flusterstorm, but I don't really like it because if we're doing a counter war, and let's say they play a threat, and I play a Counterspell. They play a Counterspell, and I play Flusterstorm. They can't counter my Counterspell on their Counterspell, but they can just let my Counterspell or they can let my Flusterstorms resolve. They don't need to counter my Counterspell back on that in that order, and just counter my original Counterspell. This is something I've said about your spell can't be countered counterspells like Counterflux or Dovin's Veto. Those are strong effects, but they're not strong defensive effects. They're strong offensive effects. What I mean by that is they're good at stopping a spell that is proactive for them. It's not good at protecting your spell. So if I play a Jace and they counter it, my Dovin's Veto is not that good. Because the fact that it can't be countered, it doesn't matter. They just counter the Jace again while it's on the stack. Rather, if they're playing, say, a big game like Escape Shift, and I Dovin's Veto, that's very strong. Or if they're playing, obviously, Flusterstorm's good at countering Grape Shot. So it's more situational. They're not defensive necessarily. But it's properly understanding my vocabulary. Like clearly, you're countering in a defensive context, but what I mean is you're not countering to protect yourself in a defensive way, to protect your spell, rather. You're countering to stop their offensive spell. But anyway, so here is Cauldron Complete. I'm going to be taking a big beating for 5. If I want to, I could, I guess, path it. Or I could try to set Terminus later. Like, there's pretty much anything in my deck that answers a creature can answer this Cauldron Complete. So that's why I think Batterskull is just an overall better threat. But there could be reasons to have Cauldron Complete still in the deck. Like you just want it to be threat dense or something like that. But there's nothing in my deck that destroys. So Teferi can just bounce the token. Jace can bounce the token. Teferi can even bounce the Cauldron Complete, but there's really no reason to do that. Path to Exile exiles it. Terminus puts it on the bottom of the library. Even the card that I like that no one else plays, Blessed Alliance, makes them sacrifice an attacking creature. So I can't think. I guess if I was like blocking with a Colonnade and a Snapcaster Mage, that's the one situation where it's better than Batterskull, I suppose. But even then, I'm not sure that's true because Batterskull can just recycle. Okay, no, I think this is Batterskull. I guess I only see he has 4 counters on it. I guess that's representing its power and toughness. So maybe that's just a fancy looking Batterskull. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I really thought that was a Cauldron Complete, but I guess the overall details don't matter at the moment. If we see him do a bounce, the sort of flicker with my Stoneforge, like we used to see in Standard past. I think whether or not, no matter which one it is, I still like being in the position of the control player because all I really have to do is identify what the worst threats are dedicate certain amounts of answers to them, and then just play a better card advantage game over a longer period. And the cards in my deck, other than Entreat the Angels for the most part, are in the deck to generate card advantage and board control, can also just win the game, like Jace the Mind Sculptor, Teferi, Heroes of Dominaria. And even though Teferi Time Raveler and Narset Partervales don't win the game like by themselves, like those cards don't have an ultimate that basically generates a value to win the game, that combination of cards can still win me the game, because I've had a lot of games where I had those two out and I find the Geier Reach and I just lock them out. I counter all their spells, kill all their stuff, and then I'm just like draw step discard, and that's just such a good feeling. Okay, so I find Brainstone, I cast it off a Field of Ruin, which is one other nice thing about Brainstone. The Field of Ruin mana becomes a little less bad with Counterspell being in the format. It still might not be worth playing. I want to make that clear, because I think I've had a few games where the colorless mana kind of hosed me a bit. And I am playing a Mystic Gate to kind of make up for that. But okay, so we've got something happening here. Instep Ice Fang. Looks like that's going to resolve. So the pressure is real. I need to find a Terminus. I can afford to take a decent chunk hit here. Instep Brainstone, set up a Terminus. But a Counterspell could be devastating, especially if I don't have enough to fight back with. And we've got a sword too. Oof. That's probably a Sword of Fire and Ice, which is like worst case scenario, to be honest. Alright, I'm doing something. Yep, I'm activating Brainstone. Maybe I already set up a Terminus? Nope. I think I was just trying to blind find one. So did I find one? I see a Snapcaster Mage. I think that's a Path to Exile. Nope. It's 2 lands. I don't have a way to shuffle either, so I'm like Brainstorm locked, which is never in a great place to be. Yeah, there's nothing. No path, no Terminus. I don't think it was a Terminus. If I have Terminus on top and I can resolve it, I think I'm in great shape. But being at 6 life is a little scary because there is Culture Complete in this deck. And plus, those even if it's Terminus, those equipment are just going to hang out there. He's representing Counterspell. So he's in a decent position now. The game took a pretty sudden, he's generating card advantage. I'm pretty sure that is Sword of Fire and Ice. So he draws his card. I take 2 more damage down to 4. So not looking good for the hero this game. Okay, but I did find Terminus. So that's exactly what I needed. And he's got a thing. There's Counterspell. So I need my own Counterspell here, or I'm just dead. I don't think there's anything else I can have here. And I have a bunch of cards in my hand, so I was like, yeah, there's no way I don't have Counterspell. But I can't use Force's ability. I have to hardcast it. And since it is my turn, if he has his own Force, we're just dead. So I scoop him up. So here's where Force of Negation shines as a good card. But the good news there, even though ultimately I lost the game, Force of Negation being pretty castable, it's basically a cancel. It's still good even on your turn. I had enough mana and I had some fight back, but just not quite enough. Even if I had double Force there, Force of Negation is a much more fair card than Force of Will. So let's go ahead and skip over to the third game. I want to watch all the filler here. Oh, this is the problem with skipping, is I usually go just a little too far. Okay, so starting in game 3, I have a turn 1 Brainstone pass, and now I can set up Terminus much more efficiently if needed. But overall, I think having a sort of tempo game plan, like a lot of Delver decks do in Legacy, where you play Threat with Counterspell backup, is pretty strong against control decks, and really just a lot of decks. Now that clock isn't as fast as a Delver deck would normally be, but it's still worth noting that just overall having proactive game plans usually you can't go wrong, especially in a format as wide open as Modern, especially right now. We're still in the post-Modern Horizons 2 environment, even though it's been a few months. And control decks, it's good to have some kind of, like, that's why I'm even in my like all reactionary deck, I still have an Entreat the Angels. Like, I want to win the game. And bringing back the Colonnades was helpful too. I would still pick Mystic Sanctuary over them, but since that's been removed from the format, that gives a little extra cushion in your ability to interact with this kind of metagame if you enjoy playing a blue-white style control deck or a Miracles-based control deck. But he has the turn 2 Stoneforge. Or no, that's not Stoneforge, I'm sorry. Because I don't see white mana, so that must be the Noble Hierarch. The deck my opponent's playing is also, I would highly recommend, a Bant control or snow control, some people call it. And you've got 3 colors, so your prismatic ending is pretty consistently powerful. Stoneforge is a good threat. Spell Queller is a good tempo answer threat. And there's a lot of different slots you can fill there. You can still play cards like Teferi and Jace. You get cards like Counterspell, Force of Force of Negation. You're not really playing board wipes, but you can play a couple Supreme Verdict in a matchup where they go much wider and faster than you. It still pitches to Force of Negation, and if you want to play Solitude, it pitches to Solitude. It gets Endurance, so it gets a lot of different, like Solitude's a card I really wanted to play with, because it's just a force to plowshares, basically. But interestingly, in this deck, I don't have that many white cards. I maybe barely have enough to consistently be able to use the evoke ability, and even then, they're white cards I'm usually not going to want to get rid of, like Terminus and Path to Exile. The deck does not play a lot of multicolor cards. It's really Teferi, and that's it. Like, it's just mono blue and a couple of mono white, and so it just wasn't good enough. Now there's a bunch of white cards in the sideboard, and that's originally where I wanted Solitude. I wanted like 2 Solitude in the sideboard, and I'm sure it's not like that bad because it's just a good card. Even if you're just casting Solitude, it's good. But I couldn't really, in my testing, justify doing it. It ended up not being better than Timely Reinforcements, which is the slot it was competing with. I do think there are matchups or even metagames where I think that the Solitude ability would override that, but that's just not the context I found myself in. Alright, so I'm being pinged for 1. I've made it to 4 land drops, and I have a high life total with some cards in my hand. So this is where I want. He's not pressuring me early with a turn 2 Stoneforge or anything, so this is good. But he is leaving open mana, and Spell Queller is scary because it's such a huge tempo swing in my opponent's direction. Like, we're trading our mana and a card, and he has an attacker in play, and a relatively decent stats attacker. A 2/3 for 3 flying is considered very strong in draft, and obviously by draft standards, modern is much more powerful. But the fact that you're instepping it flash, taking their spell and their mana, and then you untap with your mana with a non-summoning sick evasive 2-powered attacker that you only put 3 mana into is very good. I actually think Spell Queller is very underrated in modern, and it's had times that it's shined very well. Like, it's both got tribal relevance with spirits, it's got, it carries equipment in a Stoneforge deck, and now we have Stoneforge Mystic back, and it's just seen play just as a good card in neither of those scenarios, before Stoneforge and not in spirits. Alright, so here's Stoneforge Mystic, easily worthy of a counterspell because it's a board threat and it's card advantage. So I'm threatening multiple counters here, and it's pretty obvious that's what I have, so he decides not to fight over it, even though I think that card's worth fighting over. He may have a better card here. So he is playing his own Teferi, which is much better than a Stoneforge Mystic, because an unanswered Teferi is obviously a problem for my deck that relies heavily on counterspells, but more importantly, I have much fewer ways to answer it than a Stoneforge Mystic. A Stoneforge Mystic can just die to a Terminus, a Path to Exile. But what am I? There's really only one way I'm killing this Teferi. Oh, I'm sorry. There's 2 potential ways I can kill that Teferi. The most consistent way, and I'm clearly looking for a counterspell here, the most consistent way is to attack it with Colonnade, which is very good. But there is one other. I could find my one of Hero of Dominaria and like tuck it, third from the top, and that's a thing. But that's a 5 mana spell, and even though Colonnade's a 5 mana investment, at least it's a land and it's already on the battlefield and it's not open to counterspells. I have a lot of good cards, but it might not be good enough. So I go to play my own Teferi, which would be strong. My opponent has the Force of Negation, which is right on time, and I can't fight over it. Even if I don't think I have anything, but even if I did, the Teferi is just going to stop me. And I have to decide. I have this Snapcaster Mage. I'm like, do I just run out this naked Snapcaster Mage to try to pressure? Because I can't do it on their turn. And I ultimately decide it's not worth it. But that decision might be wrong, because like, if I were to cast it, it'd be so many seconds. So he ups it to 2, probably plays a blocker, so that I would at least have a chance to like remove his blockers and attack it. But now he's going to be at 3. That's going to be at least 2 attack steps. I find Vendilion Clique, which is good of a card as it is. I just don't think it's good enough here at sorcery speed. So he's got a spell, and he's got a spell queller. That's really good. Spell queller is extra good with Teferi, because even if you kill it before getting rid of the Teferi, you're not getting your spell back. So I have Terminus. I'm at 5 lands, but only 1 source of white mana. But I think if I can find another white mana and resolve Terminus and resolve it, that's an important thing. It can't be spell quellered, but I think that would be very strong. So I find mana number 6, but not white number 2, although all of those Field of Ruins can represent white mana. And it looks like I should have enough time because he's only got yeah, okay. I think this play is good as long as I'm still able to. Okay, I'm casting off. As long as I'm still able to use that. Oh no, I tapped Field of Ruin. I think that other land is Geier Sanitarium, so that may have been a mistake. Maybe I'm looking for a white mana. Or no, I already played my land. I think that's a mistake. I need to be able to cast a Terminus like ASAP. So he flashes in a Prismatic Ending. Maybe he's trying to find a way to present lethal. So if he has Stone Fort, if he puts in Culture Complete, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. No, that's Exile. So that other spell queller, he exiled the Force of Negation. So now I don't have as much time because he's got a lot of pressure. I do think if I knew it would have resolved, Teferi's a good play here because I can untap 2 lands. But knowing it's unlikely to resolve, I don't know if it's as good of a play, but it's one of those situations where, well, it's kind of lose-lose because if this isn't resolving, there's no way Terminus is resolving, right? So it's like going for the best possible scenario of my outs. I think, in hindsight, maybe that wasn't such a bad play. Because I can't miracle Terminus with Teferi in play. So he just got, whoever has Teferi wins the game, usually. So I'm hitting my land drops, but not having that double white on time is important. So there could be an argument here that this is where Field of Ruin is bad, but I think it's more of a misplay on my part a couple turns ago, because I should have just activated it, had my white, then I would have Terminus. Now I think ultimately it doesn't matter because he just has all those counter spells in his hand. So I just scoop it up and my opponent takes the match. I think there was a combination of misplays, but I'm not sure it would have won me the game, but I think it would have put me in better positions to win the game. So going into round 2, I think I mulligan to 6, but I'm not certain. And I'm pretty sure my opponent is playing Elves. Yes, so my opponent's playing Elves, which is traditionally a very good matchup for Miracles, because turns out the card Terminus is a good card, especially when it's efficiently set up, or Miracle just outright. But when you Miracle the Elves player at the right time, they're just dead. Even cards with the reach, like Shaman of the Pack, which is one of the main reasons to play Elves right now, doesn't even work. So like if they Shaman of the Pack, they get like 2 triggers, that's going to hit you for like 12 life, which is pretty good. If you Terminus in response, you're taking 0. Like when the ability resolves, there are 0 Elves on the battlefield. But that's not to say Elves doesn't have some game. They can put out a lot of power really quickly. They don't even have to attack you to win the game. And they generate card advantage in their own way. I mean, there's no glimpse of nature, but Elves definitely has game. But I would say that this is one of Elves' worst matchups. So he's putting some power in play, put some Elves in play. He's already got 5 power on turn 2. It's pretty good. Overall, I still prefer to be in my position. I think I'm on the play this game too, so it's just like everything that could go right seems to be going right. Force of Negation, not so good. Even though they are playing a few non-creature spells that are worthy of being countered, like Collected Company, they're usually playing them on your turn. And so paying 3 mana as a cancel to counter their Collected Company, I'll do it if I have to, but I'm usually not in positions where I can afford to be doing that. I'm usually tapping out for a Planeswalker or Terminus or something. However, Counterspell trading 1 for 1 and going up mana there is good. So I would probably just leave. I don't know when you ever take out Counterspell unless you're playing like against humans or something where they have Cavern Souls. I'd probably take Counterspell out. But even then, it's like there's not. I don't know if there's enough cards to bring in to take out Counter because you're obviously taking Force of Negation out. And as you can see, I have a Force of Negation in my hand, so it's a little awkward. My mana is a little awkward too. So I'm probably just going to take a few hits and not much I can do about it. So I got to decide, is my life total, am I in a situation where I just need to buy as much time as possible? I guess I decide that I am. That's clearly the best card to take because it's not only is it a 2-power beater, but it has combo synergy with Nettle Sentinel. No, I'm sorry, that was Nettle Sentinel with Heritage Druid. So I decided to just go ahead and take it out. He looks like he clearly just has enough mana. He still has 4 cards in hand, so but I'm already at 9. That would have put me to 7. Yeah, I think that decision was correct. And I still have enough mana to activate this Field of Ruin for my second white if needed. The only double white card in the main board is Terminus, though, not counting Entreat. But looking at my opponent's battlefield, does he? Yeah, it looks like he has the he has 2 different non-basics. I do tell him it is untapped, and he's pretty obviously leaving up Force of Negation. Now this is still his turn, so if I'm lucky, he'll see that I've tapped low, effectively tapped out, and he might try to resolve it, and that's where I can just get him with Force of Negation. But my opponent is smarter than that, and it looks like he's letting me go to my turn. But it's so obvious this is a collected company. Like when your opponent, your creature aggressive opponent goes land, and 4 mana pass. It's like, come on. The only other thing I could have him on is, I guess I could have him on. Okay, I think I read my read, so I'm just like, I'll pass back. You can have it. I'm not getting like. There's one way I lose this game, and that's him resolving that, untapping, and just killing me, being at 9. So as tempting as it is to like play Jace there, I can't use the Pitch Force ability on my own turn, and that's like an important thing to remember because I've had a few opponents when that card was like still kind of newer, and it's not even that old altogether. But when it was newer than it was now, I've had situations where my opponents like tapped out for a Jace or something and passed, and I instead did something. They tried to force. I'm like, bro, this ain't Legacy. So very good follow up from my opponent. Easily threatening lethal, so I need to find Terminus now, and it looks like I am not going to find it. So I'm sitting there, I play my land, I've got good cards in my hand, but I'm down to 4. He's got a huge battlefield. So we're basically in a situation where if I answer your battlefield, I'm like pretty likely to win, but if I don't, I just lose. And I think my hand is Jace, Snapcaster Mage, and Blessed Alliance. Now, Blessed Alliance is a good card to have here, but I don't think it's going to save me because of the Lord. So he attacks. I look at my hand. I'm like, do I want it? Is it even worth revealing this card? Now, Snapcaster Mage does block and cast a path, so I think that can help me survive one more turn. But even actually, I think that's not enough. So I block a Nettle Sentinel and take 4? Yeah, I think I'm just dead. And it's just, didn't find the Terminus. If you don't find your board wipe, Elves will beat you down. They will overwhelm you. And it's kind of cool, seeing Elves beat blue-white. That's not usually what you see. So any Elf fans watching this, I hope that was worth it. I mean, I guess I'm not dead yet, but I feel pretty dead. I fetched a 3. What am I doing? Oh, I have a Blessed Alliance. Okay, I think I'm still dead. Because he could sack a token, I block a 2-power, and then I still take 3. Oh, I can just gain 4 life. Okay, I'm not dead. I'm probably going to lose the game. I really don't remember. But, so I block Nettle Sentinel. I gain 4, take 4, and go to 1. Whew. If I hit Terminus off the top, that's really good. But I don't know if it's good enough because being at 1, I mean, just a top deck Shaman of the Pack is pretty scary. He plays his guy because I think he realizes, I mean, he either has it or he doesn't. I actually don't like that, though. you might be able to say it's a miracle. It was a miracle that I found a miracle. Is that how? No. So that was pretty sweet, and then I get a Jace. Oh, it's about as good as it can get. Now, obviously, just Shaman off the top, I lose. But this Jace could ride me to victory. So I start Fate Sealing him because I'm like, well, what's the one thing that killed me? Now, here, he had two, at least one power creatures. If he would have just held on to those and played them here, in this exact situation, I might not be able to. I might not be able to come back from it. So that might have been a mistake. But I don't blame him. I understand his line of thinking there. And I could have either brainstormed with Jace to try to find an answer, or I have a guaranteed extra turn there, so I can just go ahead and do it. Oh, actually, I'm at 3. I'm not at 1, because I would gain 4, take 4, and I was at 3. What he needs here is 2 attackers. I would at least have 2 attackers. Sure do miss Mystic Sanctuary right about now. Okay, that's good. That's a scary proposition. So we both draw and discard. He has no cards in his hand. And it looks like he drew Collected Company, which obviously he would love to cast, but he doesn't have any cards in his hand. Or the mana. So Entreat is pretty good. I need to be able to survive long enough to miracle set it up. And I think, I don't know, so like I could Brainstorm, put it on top, play a land. But then I don't have a card in my hand to discard. So if I draw the Entreat, I have to discard it. So I keep the land in my hand. I could Brainstorm on top, but then I don't have mana. So I'm in a weird situation. I think I have to Brainstorm here and try to just find something good. Path to Exile will be alright. Yeah, I decided to Brainstorm. Okay, that's a good draw. So I find Fetch Land, and actually this is perfect. I find what I need to, I don't know if I do this, but I need to put, looks like I'm putting 2 lands on top. I don't like that. I need to put Entreat the Angels second from the top. Right? I guess I could do that, or because I have Cryptic Command, right? So I can like tap your team, draw a card, I can tap your team, counter your spell, or something like that. Or bounce the guy even. But I think setting up Entreat is correct. So that might have been a mistake. I think I'm trying to make it to where I set up on his turn. There's a lot of different ways to do that, as I could easily see that being a mistake. I'm not really in a position where I can afford to fetch, I don't think. So I want to be able to take a hit from like a 1-1 if necessary. That's a lot of lands. Okay, I find Terminus. That's very strong. So I can put Terminus and Treat. I can Geier Reach on his turn to Terminus his board away. So now I have cushion against a Shaman in the pack. But honestly, if he draws Shaman, he should not cast it. He should hold in his hand until there's like maybe a couple guys, and he can like Guy, Shaman to kill me, and just force me to answer his already lethal attacker board. That's just my opinion. I think that would be more correct there. He's making green mana. I think he's just going to overrun, which seems like win more, and maybe it is, but it makes each individual card lethal. So if I have like Path or like Snapcaster, it's not enough. But fortunately, I have the right answer. So the way this works is I reveal it and then I have to discard a card. So I discard a fetch land. I resolve Terminus, and hopefully that is enough. And he put a bunch of mana into his. He discards. Oh, he had the Shaman too. This game's pretty close. If he would have held onto a Shaman, which kind of makes me think his last card is Collected Company, right? That's gotta be Shaman's gotta be his best card. He's trying to figure. I think he's trying to see here if he can regenerate. And I'm like, well, you can, but your guys will still be put on the bottom of the library. So, not the most intuitive. If you don't play against a lot of Terminus. Terminus doesn't really see a lot of modern play. It's really only in a deck like this. I should say Terminus in general only sees plays even in Legacy and blue-white based decks. Alright. Top card is Entreat, and that should win the game. But if he has Collected Company as his last card and he finds 3 Elves and a Shaman, I am still dead, and I don't really have a way around that. The only way... Okay, so here's a hypothetical. I believe this is still game 1, right? Yes. So I tap out, make a bunch of angels, and I brainstorm into blue card Force. So I can that would be good enough. That's like Magical Christmas Land, like best case scenario. But I put 16 power in play, which is a little annoying because he's at 17. So that kind of sucks. But, you know, gotta do what you gotta do. They're also blockers, so that's like time if he doesn't find Shaman. But I'm really glad to see that some people are still believe in Elves, even though I think Elves isn't it's at its best. Okay, I decided not to brainstorm. I'm like, I'd rather just like if I can keep him from drawing an amazing card here, that's like countering the spell, right? That's I guess my logic. So he clearly has it. So I'm like, okay, well you can't. I guess double shaman would kill me. And he has two. He has another draw step because I don't have lethal. Oh no, I'm bad at math. I have 5 angels, so that's 20. So it is lethal. So he needs double shaman right here. Well, it's not a double shaman. I mean, as good as Archdruid is, it's not going to be good enough. Unless he has a land shaman in his hand, but I think he has 1 card. So I did have Force Negation on top of my library. And nope, there wasn't a blue card. So it wouldn't have mattered. But man, that would have been a blowout. If I would have had like Force blue card for his Collect Company on main phase. Because he was clearly looking for Shaman there. I attack for 20. And is that good enough? I think it will be. Yep, and he scoops him up. So Miracles takes game 1, but not exactly by like, that wasn't exactly like auto win. Like, it was pretty dang close. There was a lot of moments there where I almost lost the game. And now Elves is on the play, which significantly improves the deck. And it looks like I'm taking mulligans. So I have turn 1 Brainstone, which I think is exactly what you want against Elves, so that way you have the option of setting up Terminus as fast as possible. And look at that start from the Elves player. Just boom, bunch of dudes. So we have a turn 1. Oh man, that's insane. So turn 1 Heritage Druid, turn 2 Dwindlin's Lead, tap into Archdruid. I might just be dead here with Archdruid mana. Collected Company. Oh, I might go to 0 life this turn, or at least really low. Okay, that was not nearly as bad as it could have been. However, that's still a pretty good attack power. He's got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So even though I might not be dead, I'm half dead. He still has 2 mana. Actually, he effectively still has 5 mana. That is insane how good this deck can be. So I'm hoping this gives anyone who likes Elves hope that if you can put up this much game against your worst matchup, or at least one of your worst matchups, that the deck still has a lot of game left to it. Like, trading 1 for 1 with Elves is not going to win. Like, you have to have something like Terminus. Now, there's one downside to Elves, and that's the card called Plague Engineer. But interestingly, I haven't seen it much lately because we've had a bunch of like Ragavans and Channelers and like cards that don't match up. Even though it can kill those cards individually, they don't match up as well. So he tapped. Oh, okay, so much mana. Okay, yeah, I think I might be dead here. Okay, no, I'm just a few short. So he couldn't quite kill me. I think he figured that out. He's like, I'll just put you as low as possible. I'm like, yeah, that one's sick. He should have not have tapped his token. He would have had an extra 3 damage. But either way, not lethal. So here, so I've got Terminus in my hand, and a Brainstone, but I think I stall on lands because I mulligan to 5. So he takes game number 2 pretty convincingly. So he capitalized on my stumbling, even if I had a white mana, it was just too slow. Like, I had the fastest possible Terminus that wasn't just luck miracle, which was turn 1 Brainstorm, turn 2 like set up, turn 3. But I died before turn 3, so like that's insane. So very good props to our Elves player. I don't go too far there. Okay, so going into game 3 on the play, no Brainstones. That's not so good. I do have I brought in Ashiok, which is, I don't know if that's worth it. Maybe I just had enough cards to cut, but the only thing Ashiok does that we've seen, good counterspell there. He's like, dang it, I knew you had it. You know, Ashiok stops Collected Company. Is that better than just having Force Negation? I don't know. It's not so clear. I mean, if he has Court of Calling in his deck, then maybe it is, but I don't remember seeing Court of Calling. Okay, Path Exile is a good draw. I actually have white mana, so that's nice. So I can just 1-for-1 him for a while, just stay alive, running him out of cards. But I'm out of lands, so I don't have enough mana to cast the Jace in my hand. Oh, and he's on 2 Shaman in the pack, so it's pretty scary. So he hits me before I decide to take it. I'm like, I just want to hit him with a Terminus. The downside is here, I don't use my mana. So that is a downside. Like, I just pass a whole turn cycle without using my mana. Draw a second one. So that feels bad. Missing my land drops, not hitting Terminus. But I do have double path, so I can at least take him down on his tempo a little bit, try to buy some time. But a land here would have been at least something, like Counterspell or something. He missed a land drop too, but it's not nearly as punishing for an elf player, you know. So I decided to go ahead and run out the Ashiok. I'm like, maybe I can pressure him into attacking it. This will keep him from just main phasing into Collect Company into more Shamans. But I think the way his draw lines up, he just doesn't care about this Ashiok, like, even a little bit. But like, if this was best case scenario would be like if he had like fetch land into, like if he had fetch lands in his hand, and which he clearly didn't. But if he drew one and he had a company and he was planning on doing that, that's like best case scenario. But if that were the case, he probably would just attack it, then do that, and then generate a huge board advantage. But I think he's just going to ignore it. He's like, I don't care about your Ashiok. You know, one thing that's better than Planeswalker removal is player removal, and that's a sentiment from Commander. But if it applies, that's another way of saying, you know, don't worry about their permanence if you can just win the game. All right, so I hit an opt, which is good, and even though it can help me hit a land drop here, I decide to wait and do it on his turn. But you have to be very careful, because I believe that's Mystic Gate, so you have to like be like, make blue and white, then cast opt. Because if you just tap and cast opt on your island, and you hit Terminus, you can't use it. Alright, so I've got to do that right now. So I decided, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to dig for the land, I'm just going to try and set up Terminus, because even double path doesn't stop that here. So I filter correctly. I'm knocking on the table like it's Terminus or bust. Oof, don't find it. Come on. Do I slam it here? Slam! Okay. Congratulations, the elf player does defeat me. I did have double path there, but if I take out 2 attackers, he attacks me for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he hits me for another like 5 life. Like, I was just dead. So there's no point in digging for that land, and I saw that on my turn, but did not get there. Another one for the Elves play. This one was for the good guys. So going into round 3, I was on the draw, and it looks like this might be a mirror match. We see a Celestial Colonnade. It's fairly obvious that this is some kind of control-based deck. I think it's reasonable to believe this is another 3-color deck playing Prismatic Ending, because it's probably just the better thing to be doing, whatever I'm doing over here, because I haven't won yet. But you know, just gotta play to your strengths. Whether or not they're playing Stoneforge's, Colonnade in a Stoneforge deck, maybe. So I think I saw Solitude there, and some Snapcaster Mages. So I think it's pretty clear that they're playing control deck. So Brainstone pass. I don't have Counterspell mana up, but I didn't have Counterspell mana anyway off of basic planes, and that is the only basic planes in the deck. But I think, I'm making them feel comfortable, play your threat. I can set up stuff later with this Brainstone. The one weird thing though is there are, like, the very first, I think it was the very first game where I just didn't use Brainstone. It was a 1 mana card out of my hand that I effectively just discarded and threw away. So that is a downside about Brainstone. But that could just be also my own play strategy. think I want to have the similar plan that I had round one. Even though the individual cards might vary a little differently, I think the overall strategy is the same. I mean, so if they have red mana, they could have Lightning Bolt. They could have Expressive Iteration, I guess. I'm trying to think. There's not a lot of super... Lightning Helix. So overall, it's the same. I guess I have more answers to my Planeswalkers. So maybe I want to concentrate more on like available cards in hand, but Planeswalkers have to play some role in any game I play, because I play, what, 8 of them? So I go ahead and cash in this Brainstone. I think I identify that Terminus is not what this game is about, at least not right now. Because even if he is a Stoneforge deck, he's not running it out there pretty early. So Path Exile can take care of early threats enough to where I probably want to get rid of the Terminus. Or not save Brainstone for Terminus and just use it to generate card quality. And it uses my mana, and it kind of leaves my mana open later for other things so I don't have to use it later. But that's an interesting thing about blue-white. One of the things I really like about blue-white is it does have pretty high raw card quality, similar to Jund, no, not exactly right, while still maintaining some synergy with the miracles. And the other thing I like about it is the sideboard plan is pretty straightforward and pretty good. Like, I think blue-white has a pretty strong sideboard, all things considered. I don't think mine's necessarily perfect, but given what my build was. So it looks like I have a lot of good cards in my hand, and he's mostly just playing lands. Like, he's not doing anything, and I'm playing Brainstones. And like, what are you going to counter a Brainstone? So that's making the cards in my hand better. It's finding more specific things. All right, looks like we've got some action. End step, draw 2 cards. It's a good card. I think this would be worth fighting over if my opponent has less than 5 cards in their hand. But I think I just decide, I'm probably at 7. If I miss 1 land drop, I have to discard. So this is worth countering, and I go up on mana here on the exchange, the 1-for-1 exchange. And my opponent's probably fine with this too. He's like, yeah, this takes a counterspell of his hand, but drawing 2 cards is always good. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's at 6 lands. No one's missed a land drop yet. Brainstone also helps with that. He does have Colonnade. I have Colonnade, so things are happening. Looks like we're about to see our first real spell in Jace the Mind Sculptor. I'm betting I wish I had that counterspell right now. But luckily, I have a second one. Even though it's more mana efficient to cast Force of Negation, if he has his own counterspell, Force of Negation still stops the Jace. But the good news for my opponent is he will go up on cards if I do that. So it looks like Jace is going to resolve, because I didn't just snap counter back. And if Jace finds a Force of Negation of his own, that's going to look like we're in big trouble, because I won't be able to play my own threat. And a really good threat against Jace is Narset. And it looks like I have Narset in my hand. That's a really good way to be like, okay, you play Jace, I play Narset, which is less mana, and still keeps me at card parity for a few turns and keeps you from going. So it's actually going to put me at card advantage. But because Jace nets you 1 card a turn if you're brainstorming. I don't see Force Negation. I think I see 2 copies of Archmage's Charm, which right here isn't so good. But I'm going to go way up on strength. I'm overall investing less mana and in terms of tempo, especially if I find a Force of Negation off this Narset. Because what he can do, okay, that might be just as good, because I was going to say what he can do is attack with Colonnade, but it looks like I'm going to do that. He has no way to stop this. This is better. So I get to keep my Narset in my hand, keep him from plussing, so this can actually take the Jace off the battlefield. Because if I play Narset and leave up Field of Ruin to stop his Colonnade from attacking it, he's going to plus the Jace, and now it's out of Colonnade range. So I think I made the better, whatever the opposite of hindsight was better. I was thinking better at that moment than right now. Because right now I'm like, I'll just drop the Narset and keep you from brainstorming. But that was a better play. He was tapped out. That would have been pretty bad if he had Solitude, but overall I think it was good. So I just pass here. I guess that's okay, but I kind of like playing Narset. I guess it's too obvious he has counterspells in his hand. But he's turning these Archmage's Charms into other cards, which is fair. But maybe they're better as counterspells? I don't know. 3 mana to hard counters, kind of asking a lot. I guess I decided, I don't want him 2 for 1ing, so I go ahead and just cash in the Snapcaster Mage. And I think it's kind of win-win for our opponent here, because he could just counter back and do it. He could... I do have Counterspell in my hand, but I can't... Or no, I can't cast it, actually. So here's the problem. I can't cast Counterspell twice, because I have basic planes. So I think what I have to do here is let his Counterspell resolve, and then just Counterspell his Archmage's Charm again. Even though I won't have Snapcaster Mage in play, that's the only real route that will work. Okay, I cast an Opt. I don't know why I cast Opt here. Maybe I'm looking for Force of Negation. Okay, so I tell him that his Counterspell resolves. And I use Counterspell of my own. But here's the bad news for me. My opponent is going to untap all his mana and have a lot... Like, this is the old control mirror situation. I think my opponent played that fairly well, because this situation is the situation you want to be in. And having instant speed threats, card draw, is pretty good. So this is where Archmage's Charm, I think, is good. Even though it hasn't specifically net him anything yet. The fact that I thought just a single 2 for 1 was worth countering, and spending my mana was worth it. So that may have just been a mistake on my part. Maybe it's just better to let him draw 2 cards. One of them might have just... Maybe both of them are lands, and so I can save that counterspell for the gas he finds later. There's an argument there. But I think I saw him low on cards. He had like 1 or 2 cards left in his hand, and so I just thought to myself, I think I'm just like, how many cards you got left? So if they're at 7 cards and they're in step, or 6 cards, I don't think I'd counter it. So actually, it looks like he has 3 cards. So he was at 2. He has 3 or 4. I don't know. If he was at 3 and he goes to cast, I think that is worth it, because he just runs out of gas, and his Colonnade's irrelevant because I have that. So this is where Field of Ruin is very good. It's clearly in the deck for Tron, but it does other things. It's Valakas, it's Manlands, and other relevant cards. Finds basics for me. Alright, I feel safe enough to run out this Narset. My opponent spent a lot of his own counterspells trying to fight over his Archmage's Charms. Oof, that was almost a brick. I find Terminus, which is like not great here, but I have that Brainstone. That Brainstone can just turn it into better cards. Ooh, okay, so I have Teferi, and honestly, I really like resolving Teferi here, because I know he doesn't have counter, but he does have Colonnade, and I would be making them vulnerable. But if I play Teferi and plus it to 5, it would survive a Colonnade attack. So he clearly gets ready to light up his Colonnade to take Narset down, and I think it's worth protecting. It's another card. Narset turns off his card draw. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'll protect it. Now I can resolve Teferi. Seems pretty strong. I'm definitely liking my position here. Feeling good. But control players are slow, including me, so I'll go for it a little bit. So I find a Force of Negation off my Narset activation and cast my Teferi. If this Teferi resolves, I'm going to treat it personally as if it's game over. He's about to do something, and he decides not to. Very interesting. Was it Archmage's Charm? See, Archmage's Charm here is an example where it's flexibility that makes it strong, and it's pretty mana efficient. I think I have like 5 or 6 cards in my hand. That's crazy. That's so many cards. With no threats in play, like pressuring a life totaler or pressuring some kind of game win. I think countering the Archmage's Charms ended up working out, even though I'm not so sure it's the right decision. Yeah, he does have an Archmage's Charm. Even if you're just drawing 2 cards and not countering it, I don't know why you wouldn't just do that in response to Teferi, because then you just don't use your mana. Alright, so Snapcaster Mage is doing something. it's so weird he didn't fight over that Teferi. If he had Archmage Storm, don't you try to counter there? Do you not have triple blue? Was that the problem? I didn't really look. So I cash in this Brainstone. I just used it. It's a 1-for-1. You know, I pay 1 mana. Did he just put a Snapcaster out there and did nothing? That is interesting. That's one way to put it. I'm deciding if I want to draw a card here, which is fair. He doesn't have a way to pressure the Teferi. I'm not sure what's going through my opponent's mind there. He can't counter anything. I find another Terminus. That's kind of meh. But I have Jace Mind Sculptor. Feeling pretty good. Don't see how I'm going to lose this game. Now, the question is, do I start brainstorming or do I just start fate sealing? And the answer is brainstorm. It's like, how do I lose this game? I lose this game by trying to fate seal and be cute with it and not being so up on cards. So it's honestly just better to look for Entreat or beat him down with a Colonnade than to fate seal in this situation. There are times where fate seal is correct. I just don't think it's this one because I actually don't have a card advantage engine until Jace. But now I've got Colonnade, so I can just beat him with that. He can't answer Colonnade. Yeah, the only thing I can think of is he didn't have triple blue. So there's just, I don't know. I thought he did though. And this is the other thing about knowing how to play with and against control is knowing when you're beat. It's not always obvious. I'll admit that. Sometimes you're not being attacked. There's nothing threatening to win the game. Like Jace isn't going up, so it's like, okay, I might be able to draw outs. But when, like, let's say you're in my opponent's position, your opponent has 3 planeswalkers, a bunch of mana, and like 6 or 7 cards in their hand, and they're still at 18 life. Like the clock matters. It looks like they're going to win slowly. So I'm just hard casting Force of Negation. He can't fight over it. His Prismatic Ending. I think he was trying to take Jace out, but maybe Teferi's better. Makes your Snapcaster Mages better. So there's that same Terminus I've been trying to get rid of. Still no way to shuffle, so I'm Brainstorm locked at the moment. I think, anyway. Or is that a field? No, that's a Blessed Alliance. So, a bunch of anti-creature cards that aren't so great right here. Almost certainly going to be cutting a lot of that post-board. I do have plenty of things to bring in. Like, I can bring in the 3 counterspells. Honestly, the Ashiok's aren't bad. The Elspeth seems really good, so lots of things like that. Although Elspeth's not very good against Force Negation. I think if I can sneak it under the Force Negation in anything else, so whether it's a Counterspell or anything, it is good. Prismatic Ending. So it's not as strong as it used to be. So he cast Snapcaster Mage into nothing, which is interesting. Oh no, it's still on stack. Okay, I must have a response. So it's probably just Snapcaster Counterspell. Yep. And he's like, yeah, I've had enough. Okay, so he identifies like, okay, I'm beat. Maybe I'm not dead, but I can't come back, and you'll take like 10 more minutes off the clock. Totally reasonable concession there. So we're discussing something. Probably just choices. I think I made a few interesting choices that maybe weren't correct. Whoa, too far. Too far. Okay, so on the play, I have turn 1 Brainstone. He just has land go. I'm effectively land go too. So there's the Elspeth. So I did bring Elspeth in. I've got Brainstone. I've got Field of Ruin because we know he plays Colonnade. Overall, the matchup feels like it's in my favor, but some advantage. My opponent has Archmage's Charm and I don't. My opponent has Prismatic Ending with 3 colors. We didn't see any burn spells. It's possible that those extra colors are just for Prismatic Ending. So, cracking Brainstone here looks like I'm Brainstorm locked, and it also honestly looks like I don't have a land, which is pretty bad. So I'm not sure if it was a sketch keep or if I was on mulligan it just didn't work out, but it looks like it might have just been a sketch keep, so I'm proceeding to discard. Discarding Path to Exile. Not looking hot. Can't afford to be missing land drops. Looks like I'm going to miss the next two, though, because I'm Brainstorm locked. Discarding Elspeth seems good. Ah, how about that? It's almost like I was the one that was playing here. I remembered Elspeth being in a graveyard, but it's been a couple weeks. I don't remember if I discarded there, but just in general, it seems like a pretty smart play. Ugh, missed it again. He's bottoming Prismatic Ending. That's crazy. So Prismatic Ending being your main removal spell just seems so awesome. Like there's like no matchup where it's dead, right? Usually it's like your Storm matchups are where all of your removal's dead, but even the modern Storm has the creature. But I guess if they're playing Twiddle Storm, maybe not. Okay, I find land number 3. Still very behind. But the good news is, potential good news, is in a control mirror, especially a land go control mirror, no Stoneforge or anything, if there's just enough land go, you can eventually catch up. I mean, you got more spells than they do, so if you get to turn 6 or 7 and he misses one land drop eventually, and I catch up on lands, I mean, I guess that's... I'm trying to be very optimistic here. Speaking of optimistic. But I definitely think he's in the lead right now. He's got the man advantage. He's not really down on cards. Every card he's played other than his lands have been a cantrip. He's got to have at least 6 cards. Okay, so I'm in-step clicking here, which is okay. I was going to do counter it. You know, that's kind of my thought here. He could just spend his mana. But he has so much mana, it is kind of not great. I think it's worth countering. I mean, it's a clock. I mean, you're either spending 2 mana on a Counterspell or 3 mana on a Prismatic Ending. And for the most part, you use Counterspells first. So I fight back. I'm just like, yeah, I'm discarding cards anyway. I might as well go down on cards. And he just hard casts his Force of Negation. Alright, I think I'm overall okay with this exchange. Took a few cards out of his hand. If I had a land here, I'm feeling good, but I don't. Could have clicked myself, actually. That would have been a decent play. So I cast Narset. It's awkward because Narset does not find lands. Oh, there's a land. There's another land. So Counterspell or Teferi, both are very strong. So I take Teferi because it is stronger, but maybe Counterspell is better. I don't know. I think Teferi is correct because my opponent's not really doing anything. He's not playing his own cards. And he's about to do something now. Hopefully it's just... Oh, okay. Never mind. Now he's in the run where... He's in the role where he gets to Colonnade while I'm tapped out. I was hoping he'd have his own Planeswalker and get him with... I draw another spell. These are all great spells, but without lands... This is why hitting your land drops are important in control decks. And this is why cards like Opt are important. Because early on they can be lands, and later they can be spells. They can help find specific, like Abundant Harvest, for example. And those, the first deck was playing Abundant Harvest. You name land or non-land, and you basically reveal till you hit it. So cards like that are really good. Now Opt serves additional roles because it's an instant. It can help hit your miracles on their turn. And Scry 1, you see what you're potentially drawing. So Abundant Harvest is just random land or random non-land. And for the most part, Opt is also a random card, but that occasion, if you're looking for a specific card and you see it, you can keep it on top. So they play similar roles, but that's why those kind of cards are important, is hitting land drops or turning it when you're flooded into non-lands. And Opt is nowhere near as strong as some of the other cantrips in Magic's history, like Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm. Even cards like Serum Visions are good at this kind of stuff. I don't believe I've found an Opt yet. So, coincidence? I think not. I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose this game, though, just on pure mana advantage. I've got a lot of counters in my hand, though, so if I'm lucky, I can just run them out of spells and hit land drops later. I go ahead and take care of his Colonnade while I have the open mana, so I'm just using my mana. Using your mana is important too, because every turn cycle you don't use it, that's just resources you don't have, basically. Now, some contexts do apply, but for the most part, you want to try to be able to use your mana if you can. But these matchups can be not fast. Let's see if we can fast forward a little bit here. So he goes cast Jace the Mind Sculptor. Dovin's veto just says, I veto. I do not pass your law. If this resolves, I am way ahead. I do have a Flusterstorm on backup, but I cannot Flusterstorm that. I'm like, I can't do that. Alright, you got me. My own tech against me. That is where cards like Dovin's Veto are good. Alright, next turn. Draw step, click you. Although I think it's better to click myself. I did find land number 4 earlier, so that's good. But my opponent is ahead on all fronts. He's got a nice thick graveyard for Snapcasters. He's dealt with 2 Vendilion Cliques. So 1, 2, 3 spells. So Flusterstorm would be unless you pay 4, but unfortunately, he has 4 lands. Not so hot. So I decide to Flusterstorm, and he Flusterstorms back. And I say Force of Negation. So we are really fighting over this Vendilion Clique. This is interesting. This interaction feels very Legacy-esque. Ultimately, Clique resolves, and I guess I go ahead, since we both spent so many resources, I decide to click him. He shows me his hand of Solitude. I think that's Path to Exile, Prismatic Ending, and another Snapcaster Mage. So I think if I were going to take a card here, I would take Snapcaster Mage, because it's just the best card in his hand. Did I go too far? I think I took a Snapcaster Mage, but I'm not certain. But I have a better clock in play. He's at 1 life above me. We're in an interesting holding pattern. The game is stalling and getting kind of slow, so I don't want to make this spectating boring. Okay, I go to cast Teferi. Very strong spell, but there's just no way this resolves, right? And even if it resolves, I can't really protect it. He has Prismatic Ending in his hand. So knowing this, what do? Do I just draw a card immediately? Do I not? Clearly I'm thinking about it. I have this Flusterstorm in my hand, but I don't think that's going to be enough. So I decide, okay, I'll just draw a card. I'll slow his clock down, turn it into a race. But I think it's kind of inevitable at this point. I don't think I can win. So he has his own Teferi, which is pretty bad news for me. Can't counter that with Flusterstorm. I cast Path to Exile, right? Why am I getting a tapped Plains? Oh, I think I can't. I think it's one of the... Maybe I should stop fast forwarding, huh? I just don't want this to be too boring to spectate because it's just such a stalled game state. So I'm on Jace Flusterstorm. Jace is a good card in hand, but I don't know, I just don't think it's enough. So awkwardly he bounces my Brainstone. That kind of sucks. That's like a waste of mana. Okay, Colonnade's not bad here. He doesn't have a good answer to it. Actually, I think he has Path in his hand. Of course he does. So if I cast Jace here, I gotta think, okay, what am I doing? I know he has a Snapcaster in his hand. He has a bunch of spells in his graveyard. Like, he can just snap Prismatic Ending it. If he has 4 colors, which I think he does. And it's not clear why I fetch first, if I plan on brainstorming. Okay, he has Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Wow, little dyslexic moment there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's just winning on all fronts. He's doing what I did. He's assembling the super team. I find Cryptic Command and Snapcaster Mage. Those are pretty good cards. Got a Brainstone play. Oh, okay, I'm getting some lands. It's looking a little better. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I have 8 lands. He has 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we're at land parity. We're close to card parity. And he is ahead on board. So it looks like it's close. But one of his cards is Teferi. So that invalidates a huge swath of cards. In terms, like, counterspells just don't actually do anything. But more importantly, I can't even play spells on his turn. So if I'm Snapcaster removal, like, I can't even do that. I have to do everything at sorcery speed, which is a big deal. Now, I do still know in my mind, like, he has Path to Exile for my Colonnade, and I can't do anything about it. Like, he just has an answer to my attacker. So it might be smart to put Snapcaster Mage into play first, try to bait it out, because, like, it's going to be harder for Snapcaster to actually do it, but I don't think he's going to fall for it. I can't, like, protect my Colonnade. I've already gone through 2 clicks, so I could hardcast Entreat from my hand, but that's not great. It's not clear what I'm looking for here. I guess my own Teferi is okay. Okay, is that double Snapcaster? So double Snapcaster here is not bad. That's 2 Snapcasters are good against 1. I do leave in Terminus, which is interesting. I probably only left in like 1 or 2, but so double Snapcaster is good against 1 path, but he also has Solitude, so it's looking not so good. If that Teferi stays in play, I don't think I'm going to win. Plus he has his own Snapcasters. Ugh. Alright, so I just decided to bite the bullet. I'm just like, alright, 4 mana, bounce your Teferi. And I don't have a Force of Negation for when it comes back down. This is probably not the smart play. I think it would have been better to throw out 2 Snapcaster Mages, like, and opt and draw a card. And alright, so he's just spending all his mana, being as efficient as possible. So yeah, that Force of Negation is supposed to be exiled. I don't know how much it'll end up mattering. I want to protect my Jace, so I spend my mana too, since I can't do it on his turn. Looking pretty bad. So he goes to his turn. Teferi's netting him a card. Hell, this is bad. I think he also has a the blue castle. Vantress? I don't remember. Oh, he has Narset too, so he's playing my game. This is my strategy. It's not very nice playing your opponent's strategy against them. So now I can't brainstorm. Ugh. This looks pretty much unwinnable. And he only ends up netting 1 mana on this Narset. Yeah, he has all fronts covered here. But I keep battling it out. I guess I clearly don't feel like I'm beat yet, which I definitely should. Wait a sec. Does he cast that Force of Negation again, or did he just finally move it? I'm like, oh, I can't even draw a card. Awkward. Don't even know how my own cards work. Like, I play with Narset and point this out, but it's just one of those situations where the game's gone so long, it's like, okay, what are my possible outs? So he reminds me I can't do that, which is correct. Yeah, it's looking pretty bad. So he Solitudes away my Snapcaster Mage. Deals with Jace. And I'm just like, why am I still playing? Okay. I'm clearly done playing. I played way too many turns there, especially because we're going to game 3. Or do they call time in the round? Maybe we draw here, actually. Or do I win 1-0? I think we draw here, or I win 1-0. I really don't remember. Like, if we didn't actually finish... That might have been why I was playing. If we didn't finish the game, the time was running low. Okay, we'll go ahead and I really don't remember. I'll have to look that back up. Would be unfortunate for him, but he didn't have a clock on me, you know. Okay, so it looks like I am on the draw, and my opponent thought seized away my Path to Exile with a Courtyard. So they're playing black-white. Taking a path, I think, indicates definitely something with relevant creatures. Now we have an unmarked grave. The jig is up. So we know what our opponent is doing. It is Reanimator. And their reanimate target is usually Archon of Cruelty, which is a really it's a powerhouse. And it's another one of those. There's so many sleeper-ish cards in Modern Horizons 2 during the spoiler season. People just didn't seem to be as hyped on what like a lot of people were focusing on cards like Grief and Solitude and a few other ones, that they weren't putting their attention on cards like Urza Saga, Ragavand, and Archon of Cruelty. Like, these cards got a little overlooked. Maybe Archon of Cruelty not so much, but it basically is a Titan. It's like Primeval Titan. Well, not like Primeval Titan, but it's like a Grave Titan or Sun Titan, where it has this enters or attacks trigger. But the overall triggers are so devastating. They discard, they sack a permanent, like you draw, you gain life. Like, it's a 6/6, or I guess a 5/5. Whether it's actually stronger than other Titans, I guess is debatable. Like, Grave Titan snowballs really fast, but I think in terms of multiple angles of attack, it's better. So Grave Titan just makes a bunch of power, but Archon of Cruelty generates card advantage. Archon of Cruelty can be an answer to other cards, so it doesn't just draw you cards and make them discard cards. Like, if there's a permanent play, it deals with the permanent. Like, if it's a creature or planeswalker. So I think Archon it's usually the default target. Makes sense. And it turns out Path to Exile is good against a all-in reanimate guy. So I think this matchup is fairly good. I've got a lot of sideboard tech. I've got things I can do. It's also Counterspell is good against this deck too. Trading 1-for-1 against a deck like this is good. Alright, 3 mana into Vindicate. Okay, so backup plan. If I can't meaningfully reanimate my cards, I'll take you off your lands to make your counterspells bad, which is a very reasonable strategy. Is it reasonable enough? I don't know. I mean, Vindicate is a sorcery. Like, you're taking your whole turn to take me down a land, and then when I untap, I play a land, and have just as many lands as you. So I don't know. I think he missed a land drop here, because I'm pretty sure he was on the play, and if I untap and play a land. So yeah, it looks like he missed a land drop here, but I guess the good news for him is that he has all spells in his hand, so maybe it's not so bad. I don't think the reanimation deck needs a bunch of lands in play. And so obviously, if most Magic players already know this, but if for some reason you don't, clearly there's no card in his deck called Reanimate. Magic has this interesting history to name a type of effect after the first card to do that effect. And so I'm not certain that Reanimate was the first card to bring a creature back from the graveyard. Actually, I'm pretty sure it wasn't, but it was like the biggest and best one of its time. So the card Reanimate brings a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. This deck plays a card called Persist, which is both a good card, and it's very on flavor because it puts a -1 counter on it, like a creature with a persist ability. Okay, so 3 Vindicates later, and no white mana. What is happening? Did he actually try to Vindicate my Flooded Strand? Okay, the world makes sense again. So I believe I fetch basic island there because I want to cast Counterspell, and I didn't have any dual. I only play 1 Hallowed Fountain and 1 Prairie Stream, which, I mean, in situations like this, it's definitely debatable whether that's the correct decision, but it's almost always. In fact, this is the only situation where that mattered. Between fetching basic plane, like, there's 3 fetchable white sources. But there's definitely an argument because of how blue intensive the deck is now to, like, maybe cut an island for another, like, Hallowed Fountain or something. I think that's what I would do. I recently added an island I don't remember why I chose to add an extra. I definitely went down to Plains for a Counterspell, but I put in Mystic Gate. So I think I'm going to go down 1 island plus 1 Hallowed Fountain. But it also might be correct to go down to, because this mana is a little awkward with Field of Ruin. But man, when Field of Ruin is good, it is good. More importantly, it's more shuffle effects, but it's definitely good. Okay, we've got Collective Brutality with no additional modes, and I reveal Path to Exile, Entreat the Angels, Teferi, Time Raveler. Oof, Teferi. He's going to have a hard time beating this board. Narset is mostly just card draw. Like, it's not, in terms of the matchup, it probably gets boarded out. Alright, he decides to Prismatic Ending the Brainstone, and given that I'm low on white mana, that seems smart. But I did find a fetch land, but I'm pretty sure there are no fetchable white sources at the moment. Okay, no, actually, I think I do have Prairie Stream still. But I couldn't fetch it untapped that turn. I think that's what happened. Okay, I find Cryptic Command, which is a good card. But do I just want to slam Teferi here? There's really no reason to put Teferi in play. Yeah, I think about it. I'm like, I could put Teferi here, but him playing he's already playing a sorcery speed. And I can just save Teferi for when the creature's in play and then return Archon, an 8 mana creature, back to his hand. He's got another Vindicate. Holy crap. That is 4 Vindicate. I don't know what I would do either if I was in my opponent's shoes. Like, he's drawing good cards. It's just, I don't know if they're enough. Okay, he's like, okay, I'm just going to go for it. Cast this. And I left my mana open, so I think it's correct to use use the Cryptic Command here. The game's been so stalled that the life total hasn't changed in over 10 minutes. Or maybe not 10 minutes, but several minutes. So I go to fetch. Even if it's just a basic island here, I can clearly cast this Cryptic Command. But I'm pretty sure I have Prairie Stream. And Prairie Stream, it's a good card in this deck. It's almost always just Tundra. So that feels nice. It doesn't look like I'm 1 mana short from being able to go Field Rune into that. Or maybe I'm 2 mana short. I don't know. But anyway, pretty good situation. Archon will still be able to draw a card, I think, in the order of its abilities, because it would sack the guy for the Narset first. But here I have Jace, and Jace is worth casting here. And find Path. Okay, Path and Snap. Like, I don't think I can lose this game. And I have my win condition set. I can set up. Pretty strong. Looks pretty convincing. Our opponents didn't have a bad, you know, they had turn 1 discard, turn 2 setup, and then they had the reanimation ready. I guess they missed their 4th land drop a few turns, but I think I had a counterspell almost every turn. So you go ahead and play Vindicate again. Does he hit the white source? I would have hit the white source personally, but I don't blame him from taking Jace out, because you can't really keep a big creature in play when there's a Jace. I set up Terminus just in case, to keep everything around. But interestingly, even though my next card is Entreat the Angels, I only have 1 white mana. So I could go get the second white and make 2 angels? 3 angels. Actually, that's still pretty good. That's still pretty good. Alright, so there are no more Vindicates. We're done with that card for this match, or for this game. I can't remember what I do. I think I get greedy and I want to set up a really big Entreat. So if I have a counterspell here, the question is, do you counter the spell? And honestly, maybe not. Liliana might just be too slow here. But I do it anyway. So I can't in-step Field of Ruin because I don't want to shuffle Entreat away. Okay, so I'm clearly deciding not to Entreat. I think Entreating would have been fine, personally. I can draw the card, respond to the reveal trigger, activate Field of Ruin, get a Plains, make 3 angels. That seems good. Because now I don't have a way to put it back on top. And now he gets, like, it's not so hot anymore. I decided to sacrifice the Narset because it's not doing anything. Well, I guess I could have kept it and he wouldn't have drawn a card, but oh well. I still think I'm in pretty good position. I have a lot of mana. I have a lot of cards in my hand. I discarded Terminus, which is a little awkward. And I draw Force of Negation. I do still have the Entreat, like, around. And I have a Path in my hand. And actually, I don't even need Path. I could just Teferi. Oh, it feels so good. Okay, now I can get my other white source. So that's nice. And he's 3 lands away from casting that Archon again. Pretty sure I win this game, if I remember right. Because this is the last round. Alright, so here he does something. Prismatic Ending for 2. Oh, my Snapcaster Mage? I'm sitting here thinking, do I really care about that? Probably just want to keep him off Archon, right? Or is it for 3? Oh, that's a Blood Crypt. Okay, so he had Blood Crypts to give him a 3rd color. That's fair. So I finally get my 2nd white source, and I could even consider... So I'm actually in a weird position where I don't have 2 basic planes in the deck because of cards like Counterspell. So I can't get a 3rd planes and just cast it from my hand, but I don't think there's a need to, even if I could, rush to that. Because I can just find a Jace or a Brainstone and put it back on top. Finding the Force Negation, as good of a card as it is. Oh, I do draw. I don't think I like drawing that there. I don't think that's the game I'm playing right now. I just want to find a way to win the game. But it's reasonable. Looks like most of the threats he casts are non-creatures. Okay, I find Jace, so now we've got everything we need. Took him off his 3rd color too, and so he's nowhere near having 4 colors to take Jace down, and Jace doesn't really need to survive in a turn and a Brainstone, so I just found everything. So I think I definitely should put Entreat on top and just try to win as fast as possible. And I'm also pretty sure if I just reveal Entreat and go to cast it for 5 Angels, he just won't have a way to beat that game 1. Sorry, make that 6 Angels, so I get to play a land. He is up to 6 mana. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's at 6 mana. So he's two lands away from hard casting Archon, but he's just like, yeah, I'm not beating what you have in play. So Miracles takes game 1. Let's skip on to game 2. Don't want to miss any of the action here. Oh, always do. Okay, so he's thought seizing me, which is a very good turn 1 play. And I have Snapcaster, 2 lands, Path, Vendilion Clique, Counterspell. Very strong hand. So I think I would definitely be feeling good about this game, but there are situations where he could beat me. Oh, double Path. Like, Path is probably the best card against this deck, because he's like all in on one big creature. He just passes the turn. Ugh. Feel kind of bad. Missed his lane drop. And I have just like a sick hand. So, I think I bottomed with Opt. Found my 3rd land, so that's cool. I also think I was on a mulligan to 6, if I remember right. But so I told him, we're shortcutting here a little bit, but I told him, hey, I'll go ahead and draw your card. I'm going to draw a step Vendilion Clique. So he found his land. Plains, Profane Tutor, it's Unmarked Greater Persist, Liliana, and Vindicate. So he can't cast any of the 3 mana spells. I'm not going to take the spell he has 2 copies of, but those do help him hit his lands eventually. Clique is a decent clock. It's not super clear here. Yeah, I tell him, okay, I'm not taking any of the Profane Tutors. Do I take the one castable spell, or do I take the 2 relevant spells? I'm not even sure that. I think it's a persist. Actually, I don't know. It's persist or a Markgrave, new card. And I've got to think, okay, here are the cards in my hand, and here's how they match up against his cards. So I take Vindicate. Okay, I'm like, yeah, this is the only super efficient thing that answers different things I have. I only have 3 lands, so like if he Vindicates my white source, I'm in trouble. I think that was my logic there, even though he's pretty far away from that. Alright, it's looking good so far. He's down a mana. Most of the cards in his hand are too slow to impact the game anytime soon. So he just plays a Profane Tutor. I think that's reasonable. So we can get some V-Click beats. Vendilion Clique can be a pretty fast clock. Okay, found land. Alright, feeling good. Hit my land drops. Got 3 interaction spells in my hand. I think I'm well set up to win this game. Double path. If he thought seizes me again, which would be good for him, he'd see the double pathing and be like, really? 3 paths? I'm like, hey, you drew 4 Vindicates on your first game, so just how I actually draw through my deck, so it's not that unreasonable. Alright, he's in the tank. I don't blame him. Do you just play Liliana here? Just run Liliana into a counterspell? I guess he knows I have the counterspells. He's like, nah, I don't want to do that. You know it'd be really good right here. Teferi. That'd be such a punch in the face. What's weird is I may have cut. No, there's no way I cut Teferi, right? Because it can bounce his reanimated guy. Down to 9, so he's 3-turn clock. But he's about to get whatever cards he wants. So he goes in the tank for a while. It's reasonable to cast your... Okay, sure. So he casts on Markgrave. Probably just gets Archon. Yep. Plays land and passes. So he probably got the land from Tutor. I hit another land, which is... It is good, but we're getting to a point where we need some cards. We need, like, the next card, if that could be like a Brainstone, that'd actually be pretty good. Okay, so this Profane Tutor is probably going to get a Markgrave, or a Persist, rather. Okay, went a little fast there. So he plays his... oh, he Inquisitions me and takes Counterspell and resolves it. Okay, that's a pretty good sequence for him. And so next turn he can probably Persist me, and I have a Path in my hand. So if he does that, I'll end up discarding a card. Okay, so he's kind of clawing his way back. You know, he's actually kind of doing stuff. 2 paths in my hand are really good, though. This Liliana could eventually be a problem. Whoopsie. Alright, so let's see what happens. So he untaps and just passes. I cast an Opt on his instep. I think I find Counterspell. Actually, no, I think I opted my main phase and I was looking for like a Planeswalker. Ooh, I discarded. Ugh, I don't like that. I guess countering a Persist is better than Exile. No, maybe exiling Archon is better, but I'll have to discard a card. But it gets the Archon out of his graveyard, so that's kind of the difference between the counter and the removal. Okay, I need like a Jace here. That would be like my best draw. Basic Island. I honestly, I know I don't think I do here, but I should just hold that for the discard. Or another land. Alright, it makes me discard with Liliana. I just discard that land. And here he's probably going to try and bring back his... I had 2 fetch lands I didn't use. Alright, I counterspell his reanimation. He thought seizes my other counterspell. Just trying to make this go a little faster. We're playing pretty slowly. Okay, he hits his Archon. No, he doesn't. He's targeting Archon. My last card is Force of Negation. Pretty good. He's down to 4. I think he'd Shockland. He has Profane Tutor, and I think I have 0 cards. Ugh. Come on, Jace my Sculptor. Nope. Okay, it's a good card. I think I flashed it in. It's not great though, because Liliana can just pick it off. Yeah, Liliana picks it off. Profane Tutor probably finds a reanimation spell and gets Archon. I think I just lose. Interesting grind here. It looked like I wasn't able to lose when he missed his land drop, but now I've got nothing. He just slowly attritioned me out of cards in my hand. And we go to game 3. Wow, very impressive showing from the from our reanimation friend. Thanks for sticking here if you're still with us. It's been a long tournament. Alright, I'm on the place time. I get Thought Seized again. Again, I draw Path. He's probably like, I'm sick of that card. But I have Jace in my hand. I have my lands. I think I find an Ashiok here, which seems pretty strong. Now, Ashiok, as strong as it is, it's not great. It turns off his fetch lands, but it's not that good of a graveyard interaction in this exact matchup. I mean, I bring it in because like there's definitely situations where it's good, but what makes it not so great is Persist is 2 mana and Unmarked Grave is 2 mana, so they can just do it all in one turn, and then Ashiok can't stop it. But it looks like our opponent's missing his land drops again. Ugh. And it's a 3 mana spell that I can just like put out onto the battlefield. But yeah, the more I think about it, our opponent has Vindicate. Oh, I do have those, what are they called? Sanctifier en-vecs. I don't know if I actually find it in this game, but that would be good. That'd be hard to kill. Liliana's pretty much the only thing I can kill it. So our opponent's missing their land drops, and I start Fate Sealing. So it's like they said, you know, when Jace says you can keep it on top, it's not about to get any better. But he does find a land. Might be too little too late. I think it's correct to keep Fate Sealing here. Especially because I already have a Brainstone in my hand, so I can just use that to fit card filter. Okay, I'm putting back, was that second Ashiok? I didn't really get a good look. Yeah, just play a Brainstone. I did use Jace. So I decided to Brainstorm because he hit his land, and he has a fetch land anyway. But I kind of like the inevitability. Right, he just decides to scoop it up. He didn't want to. I'm like, yeah, I set up Terminus. That'd be like a 2-turn clock. So that's the Miracles deck. It's not the strongest showing, but I think it definitely shows a lot of potential. Archmage's Charm is definitely a reasonable card, and from people I've been talking to, it's the only card I wasn't playing that everyone seems to think I should be playing, and I don't blame you. I'll probably be revisiting this deck again, so I hope you guys at least like the idea of this, even if I didn't play my best or make the best card decisions. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. If you're still watching at this point, please subscribe if you haven't. That'll really help get the channel where it needs to be so we can figure out how we want to run specific decks in each event. And again, thank you very much for stopping by.